All right, all praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, God, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to you in the name of his son, Jesus. I count it truly each and every single time that I can come before you, preach the word of God, and never do I count it as a light thing to do so. All right, brothers and sisters, I want to get right into today's topic, and today's topic is dealing with the color of the Israelites in the Bible. I mean, if you most who listen to this will know, but it's always good to go over why you believe what you believe. And I, like many of you, grew up thinking that the Israelites were, I didn't even, you know what, to be honest, I didn't even really have a concept of Israelites in that particular way. Even growing up in a church, sometimes, or you may have heard something about Jews, okay? That all the depictions growing up that I saw and the private Catholic school that I went to, and even the depictions on the church fans in the church that I was in, and the mural. These were all on the baptism pool. These were white depictions of who was supposedly the Messiah and John the Baptist. And so you constantly saw, you know, I watched the Ten Commandments, the film every Easter. And peace, brother. It's good to see all you there, brother Isaiah Willie. Peace to you. I always saw that white depiction, Charlton Heston of Moses, and you saw the Israelites, who were supposedly the God's chosen people, as European, looking like they were of European descent. But when you go to history and when you go to the Bible, and I believe the Bible is the authority, and the history corroborates what the Bible is saying. It's just a support, supplementary to me, because the word is the truth. It shows you, and even archaeology, you can tell that the people of the book that are mentioned were black people. I mean, it's not even a question. And it's coming out now because you have some famous people making comments now here or there. You know, I'm not necessarily dealing with the particular comments, but I just want to deal with what the Bible says concerning the matter. And it's always funny, our people, we always want to give credence to something depending on who says it, which shows us our flawed thinking. For example, you can have many teachers teaching the truth and saying this. Peace to you, sis. It's good to see you there. That have been saying this for years and years and years. There are scholars, that have said this. Well, yeah, like the sister said, Nick is telling the truth, and he even got fired, which is a consequence of the truth. At least the part of as far as Israel being a black people, that in particular. But we put more credence because somebody who may have some kind of status, or as a celebrity says it, or some kind of athlete says it. When you can go far back, as far as scholars dealing in this and saying this, and preachers, true men of God saying this. And so I just want to deal with it, because it's not possible that the Israelites, based on what the scriptures say, were white. It's just, or looked white. It's not possible that it's just not possible that the people there today are the original people that were called Israelites. It's just, and they will even tell you that in their own writings. Okay. What you had was a lot of converts to a particular faith system. Okay. And it is even further asinine just to think, or inaccurate to think that even when you think about Jesus they make him even look European, like he straight up came out of Germany somewhere, or Italy somewhere, where the archaeology doesn't match that, the history doesn't match that, the scriptures don't match that. And furthermore, no major religion at all derived from Europe. Historically, it was the last place to be civilized. Okay. And these faith systems, whether you're talking about the faith systems, whether you're talking about philosophy, these were introduced into Europe. Religions were introduced into Europe from various places, particularly from Africa and from what they call Asia. Okay, it did not originate in Europe. Okay, But so I want to start off with the scriptures. I'm going to go to the Bereshit. We go to Genesis, the 42nd chapter. And history, the telling of history is a spoil of war. The telling of history is a spoil of war. Once you win the war, you can tell the story however you want to. Okay, you can tell the story however you want to. You can make yourself out to be whoever you want to be. Okay, you could be raising Cain, as they say. You can be bringing devastation and destruction to everything you touch and to every people that you come into contact with. But if you are there to win the war and there to tell the story, you can make it to where those people are savages. You can make it to where you are the actual civilized person. You can make it to where you are the one who is the quote unquote good guy. Okay. So one of the most arrogant things, and I'm going to just speak frankly and plainly like always, one of the most arrogant things that has ever been done is the changing of the depiction of the people of this book. I mean, that's actually what they did. Particularly, I want to read something here out of this book, Into Egypt Again with Ships. I wrote this book quite a few years ago. If I can find it, it just came to me just now. I just want to read a little bit of it pertaining to these depictions that we have. This is on page 9, Color of the Ancient Israelites. That's the chapter 2. It says, for many years, the dominant portrayal of the Israelites has been one of a people who have white skin and appear to be Caucasian. This is mainly due to artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo di Lodovico, Bernardi Simona, both of whom created some of the world's most recognized depictions of the Israelites known today. However beautiful these artists' depictions may be, they grossly misrepresent the appearance of the ancient Israelites. So when you think of, for example, St. Peter's Basilica, when you think about these depictions, they were inaccurate, okay? And they are relatively new, okay? The reason for these inaccurate portrayals is quite understandable, since most human beings have a tendency to conceptualize a God that appears as they do. A God that has bodily features such as skin tone, unlike one's own naturally seems foreign. So artists created, oftentimes as commanded by religious leaders, sculptures and paintings of biblical figures that appeared very similar to the people who their artistic works were meant to inspire. Thus today, most individuals are familiar with and continue to accept the notion that Jesus and the Israelites are white. Since the individuals who control the image of God and his people happen to be European, the images of Jesus and the Israelites as Europeans have permeated throughout the entire world. These inaccurate images have saturated the minds of the masses to such a degree that the true depiction of the Israelites as Black people seems to be a mere fabrication. Many people, including a large number of American Blacks, regard the notion of Jesus and the Israelites as Black as nothing more than a feeble attempt to instill pride in the Black race. However formed the idea of Jesus as a Black man and the Israelites as Black people may seem, this is reality. Okay? And when you go to the book, you find out, and then you cooperate again with history, you find out that yes, it's impossible for them to look as they have been commonly depicted. Okay, but you have people all over the world, colored races. When I say colored race, I'm just the various people of color throughout this world bowing down and worshiping Europeanized statues and images because Europeans colonized them or enslaved them. Okay, so even us today, even those who know or believe or even say out of their lips that Jesus is white, when they close their eyes and conceptualize, usually it's a white image there, even with the knowledge, because the image is that strong. The image is that strong. And that's what I deal with in this book, Hair Like Wool, Feel Like Burned Brass, the color of Jesus and burning truths concerning the Messiah. But now, what color were the Hebrews? What color were the Israelites? Let's go to Genesis, the 42nd chapter, and let's pick it up at verse 6. Now here, Joseph has been exalted in Egypt, okay, or Cush, or Mitzrayim. I mean, not Cush, excuse me, Cush is Ethiopia, but Kemet. Genesis, the 42nd chapter. Okay, so this is after his brethren sold him. Okay, he was enslaved. This is years after this, and he has risen into the upper echelons of government. He's second only to Pharaoh. Okay, Genesis 42nd chapter and 6. There's a famine going on, and listen to what happens. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. Now, the question that we should ask ourselves is, how in the world, when you see your brother, you can't recognize him? Especially if the people who inhabit the promised land today look as the ancient Israelites looked. Okay, because we understand, I'll show you this and read this to you in a second. The ancient Egyptians were black people. There's no question about that. Even though there's been a concerted effort to hide that fact. Now, why has there been a concerted effort to hide that fact? There's been this concerted effort to hide that fact because it does not go with the racist narrative that has been going on in regard to people of color, okay, black people, because Egypt is arguably the greatest civilization to ever exist. If you look at sacred geometry, if you look at the science, I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. When you look at the Great Pyramid, okay, and there were many pyramids throughout Egypt. There's actually pyramids throughout the world. But if you look at the pyramids and just think about them, the Great Pyramids. First of all, those pyramids are aligned with Orion, the constellation. The Great Pyramid, it's earthquake proof. Okay, it has a consistent temperature within it, no matter what's going on outside. Okay, it's perfect. It's constructed perfectly north. It was built according to pi and phi. It's in more than I believe. Okay, I'm gonna qualify my statement. I believe that let's say there's a theory, and I tend to believe it, that the pyramids generated electricity, okay, because the capstone that it had, that has been removed and taken. The outside of it, the aqueducts, because you don't need necessarily you don't need wires to create electricity, okay? And you cannot construct the pyramid. Some of those stones were between 2 tons and 60. And it wasn't like, you sometimes when they explain this building of these pyramids, you see some people pulling these, 60 pounds. I don't necessarily believe that was the case. I mean, even the mortar, they don't even know what that substance is. And those stones, many came from quarries many miles away. They still don't know how they constructed the pyramids, and they cannot construct them today with modern technology and machinery. Okay. Again, philosophy. If you do some research, you'll find out that many Greek philosophers. See, philosophy didn't start in Greece. Greek philosophers and mathematicians even went into Egypt to study. Okay, it was a hub of intellect. So that doesn't go along with the narrative. That's why. So you can't say that black people are inferior, particularly in the modern era, or even if you're looking in the last, because racism itself has been around for approximately 500 years in some form or fashion. It has not always existed. Okay. But that doesn't go along with that narrative. Okay. So you have to use science, use history, use religion in a way and tell it in a way that upholds a particular people. That's how it has been happening for hundreds of years. Okay, so there's been a concerted effort to make them the ancient Egyptians, because we understand that Egypt, eventually other people came in, and then even Arabs conquered that area. Okay, but we understand that the ancient Egyptians were a black people. Okay, so the only way that Joseph's brothers or his brother would not recognize him is if his brothers and the people look the same. Okay, so for example, when you, even though, let's say the so-called Negro in America, okay, you take the so-called Negro in America and you drop him in Nigeria, you can't necessarily tell the difference. You could drop him in a Congo, you might not necessarily be able to tell the difference. Why? Because the skin is the same. Okay, the skin tone oftentimes is the same. You know, sometimes there's some distinct structural differences, but you know, that's not always the case. So the Egyptians and the Israelites had to look similar. This is why they didn't recognize their brother. First of all, they're not even, they can't even conceive that the one they sold, that they hated, that they sold into slavery, could have possibly risen into this position of power to where they're bowing down to him. Secondly, he spoke, his communications with them rather were foreign to them, perhaps. Okay, and he may have even worn, or more than likely wore, the garb of an Egyptian. Okay, so if he's dressed like an Egyptian and he's communicating to you in a different way, and you haven't seen him in years, you might not necessarily recognize that as your brother. It's been time, and he looks like the people that he's among. But if you look like the people in the land today, then you would definitely recognize your brother. You say, that's Joseph. What is he doing there? But see, that's not the case. Okay. And I just want to read something else. Let's read from this book, Hair Like Wool, Feet Like Burned Brass, The Color of Jesus and Burning Shoes Concerning the Messiah. And let's read what the Greeks and the Romans did. We're going to look at some ancient artifacts, depictions out of this book as well. Okay. Let's see what the Greeks and the Romans said. This is on the Greek and Roman accounts, page 14. Both Greek and Roman scholars of antiquity almost unanimously describe the ancient Egyptians as a black people. For example, the Greek historian Herodotus traveled to Egypt in approximately 450 BC and may have been initiated into a mystery school in Egypt. Like I said, many of these people went into Egypt from Europe. Okay. In his argument concerning why the Nile River did not give rise to any breezes flowing from it. Just a side note, when you're looking at what you think at the top of the Nile is actually the bottom. Okay, it flows this way. But nevertheless, in his argument concerning why the Nile did not give rise to any breezes blowing from it, Herodotus describes the Egyptians as black people with kinky hair. He writes, "For the people of Colchis are evidently Egyptian, and this I perceived for myself before I heard it from others. So when I had come to consider the matter, I asked them both, and the Colchians had remembrance of the Egyptians more than the Egyptians of the Colchians, but the Egyptians said they believed that the Colchians were a portion of the army of Sototric. That this was so, I conjectured myself," listen to this, "not only because they are dark-skinned and have curly hair." Okay, he said, this of itself amounts to nothing, for there are other races which are so, but also still more, because the Colchians, Egyptians, and Ethiopians alone are all the races have practiced circumcision from the first. Okay, so now he's not even arguing the color of the Egyptians, but he describes them as black. He's actually arguing something else entirely different, and in doing so, he just describes the Egyptians. Now let's read further what he said. Also, in a direct manner, he calls them black. This is on page 15 of this book. Again, another book I wrote, Hair Like Wool, Feet Like Burned Brass. color of Jesus and burning shoes concerning the Messiah. And just a side note again, this oftentimes people they think, oh, that's just a cartoon drawing or something. No, that is from the catacombs in Italy. That's the Messiah, and that's a depiction of the Messiah and the prophets approximately during the 4th century in Italy. You see them depicted as black. That's just a side note. That's nevertheless. Again, in an indirect manner, Herodotus mentions the appearance of Egypt's inhabitants. He writes, indeed, this way has no more truth in it than the rest, alleging as it does that the Nile flows from the melting snow, whereas it flows out of Libya through the midst of the Ethiopians, and so comes out into Egypt. How then should it flow from snow when it flows from the hottest parts to those which are cooler? And indeed, most of the facts are such as to convince a man, one at least capable of reasoning about such matters, that it is not at all likely that it flows from snow. So we see he's not even talking about, he's not trying to prove the color of the Egyptians, but he says something. The first and greatest evidence is afforded by the winds which blow from these regions, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Libya. The second is that the land is rainless always, and is rainless always and without frost, whereas after snow has fallen, rain must necessarily come within 5 days, so that if it snowed in those parts, rain would fall there. Again, we're not talking about, he's not arguing this. He said the color of the Egyptians. He said the third evidence is afforded by the people dwelling there. Now, the people dwelling there, Egyptians, Ethiopians, and Libyans, listen to what he says, who are of black color by reason of the burning heat. He said, who are of black color. And we think about Egypt, Ethiopia, and Libya. Okay, think about, and biblically, those are sons of Ham. Egypt being Mitzrayim, Ethiopia being Cush, and Libya being Put. And then you had Canaan. Ham was the progenitor of the darker races. Okay, not the Negroes though, because they are Semitic. Okay, meaning from Shem. Okay, let's read it. It cannot be emphasized enough that in both of these instances in which Herodotus describes the color of the ancient Egyptians, it is not his intention to prove that they were indeed of a dark hue. However, he is not alone in his assertion that the Egyptians were black. The soldier and historian Ammianus Marcellinus described the Egyptian men as being mostly brown and black with a skinny and desiccated look. Peace to you. Peace to everybody that's listening. Peace to you. In his work, Physiognomonica, in 300 BC, Aristotle writes that the Ethiopians and the Egyptians are both too swarthy. In regard to the texture of Egyptian hair, he goes on to write, why are the Ethiopians and Egyptians bandy-legged? Is it because the bodies of living creatures become distorted by heat, like logs of wood when they become dry? The condition of their hair supports this theory, for it is curlier than that of other nations. Okay, another Greek writer, Lucian, however you want to pronounce it, spoke about, he was around about 125 AD to died approximately 180 AD, describes an Egyptian youth as not merely black. He has thick lips and his legs are too thin. His hair worn in a plait behind shows that he is not a free man. Or consider the claim of the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, or Diodorus of Sicily. He puts forth the Ethiopian assertion that Ethiopia is the mother of Egypt. Okay, because when you think about great civilizations, Ethiopia was a great civilization, and when we think of Ethiopia, we think of Kush. It was much larger than you see today on the political map. But nevertheless, the Ethiopians say that the Egyptians are one of their colonies, which was brought into Egypt by Osiris. Now, understand, even when you think about what Ethiopia means, it means burnt face. Okay, let's skip down a little bit. Page 17 in the beginning of this book, I'm reading out of Hair Like Wolf, Feet Like Burned Brass, The Color of Jesus and Burning Truths Concerning the Messiah. Page 17 again. It is necessary to bear in mind that for the Ethiopians to regard Egypt as its child, both nations were believed to be of the same race. Strabo, who was around 64, 63 BC to 24 AD, the Greek geographer, philosopher, and historian, also asserts in geography, that's his work called geography, that the Ethiopians and Egyptians are indeed of the same stock. Okay. In his work, The Dawn of Civilization, Gaston Maspero, this is around 1846 to 1916, maintains that ancient historians testify almost unanimously to the fact that the Egyptians were indeed a Black African race. Again, however, to acknowledge this obvious truth concerning ancient Egypt during the era of scientific and historical racism is also a simultaneous recognition that the foundational pillars of science, medicine, philosophy, religion, and mathematics must be accredited to Black Africans. Nevertheless, evidence exists that European scholars did just that. For instance, Count Constantine Delvoni wrote concerning the Egyptians. Listen to what he wrote. He said, all Egyptians have a bloated face, puffed up eyes, flat nose, thick lips. In a word, the true face of the mulatto. Now he says mulatto. I was tempted to attribute it to the climate, but when I visited the Sphinx, its appearance gave me the key to the riddle. On seeing that head, so now we're going to get into some of the archaeology. On seeing that head, typically Negro in all its features, or Black in all its features, I remember the remarkable passage where Herodotus says, as for me, I judge the Colchians to be a colony of the Egyptians because like them, they are Black with woolly hair. So he goes back and thinks about what Herodotus, the Greek historian, the so-called father of history, wrote in his work, which is referred to as histories. When I visited the Sphinx, I could not help thinking that the figure of that monster furnished the true solution to the enigma of how the modern Egyptians came to have their mulatto appearance. In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. I'm going to say that again. I could not help thinking that the figure of that monster furnished the true solution to the enigma of how the modern Egyptians came to have their mulatto appearance. In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. That being so, we can see how their blood mixed for several centuries with that of the Greeks and Romans must have lost the intensity of its original color. Now remember, Voni is, he's around much later, okay? This is from, and I'm reading, just so you know, I'm reading from his work called Travels Through Syria and Egypt in the years 1783, 1784, and 1785. He went on an expedition with Napoleon. Okay, so that being so, we can see how their blood mixed for several centuries with that of the Greeks and Romans must have lost the intensity of its original color while retaining nonetheless the imprint of its original mold. Volney goes on to profess, just think that this race of Black men today, our slave and the object of our scorn, is the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, and even the use of speech. Okay, so he acknowledged it. But see, when you have greater understanding, you understand that it's not just, then that's how deep racism was. Okay, even at this time. Okay, you had slave trade was going on, it had been going on for centuries. You had the French, you know, in Haiti, you had Portuguese throughout parts in like Brazil, you had the English. So these European nations are engaged in this. So you have to have a justification to do what you're doing at this time. And so you see these racist sentiments. But he says, just think that the Black race, as if all Black people are one people, and they're not. Just imagine finally that it is it is in the midst of people who call themselves the greatest friends of liberty and humanity that one has approved the most barbarous slavery and questioned whether Black men have the same kind of intelligence as whites. Well, how could you not when you had these people who built these mighty structures? You understand? You had to know some math. Again, they were dealing in sacred geometry. They were dealing in philosophy. So now I just want to I want to read something else here. I'm going back to this book, into Egypt again with ships, and just read something in regard to Herodotus, because Volney mentions Herodotus, I don't want to read something that one of the greatest African scholars, and I'm paraphrasing here, as far as I'm paraphrasing what he says in his work, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, who had 5 PhDs, who there is a and he's a Senegalese scholar, or was a Senegalese scholar. He's passed some years ago. But he has a university in his name. This is on page 15 of Into Egypt Again with Ships. It says concerning Herodotus. Herodotus' subject is not the Egyptians' blackness. Instead, the skin color of the Egyptians is mentioned to prove another argument. The renowned Senegalese scholar, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, logically explains in his book, The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality, that Herodotus may have been mistaken concerning the customs of the Egyptians, but argues that Herodotus was at least capable of determining their skin color. Why did he have to do that? Because so many people, Europeans in particular, tried to go against them being the idea of them being black when it was evident. Okay, and I just want to show. I'm back in this book here again. Feel like wolf, feel like burn brass. I'm gonna show you some images of some of the ancient pharaohs, and queens of Egypt. Okay, hopefully you can see this. This is King Aha-mene-Nemer, or King Menes. This is approximately 3100 BC. Okay, you see the features there. Okay, so now let me go back a little bit. Let me go back to this book and show you something else. If I could find it, hold on. Because the Sphinx was mentioned, okay? Now this is the Sphinx. If you ever see the Sphinx, the nose is removed and the lips seem to be, at least the top lip seems to be it has been damaged or lost. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so now let me show you. Now this is in this book. Here I show you a sketch of the Sphinx before the nose was removed. You see that nose? You see those lips? Okay, that's not a European. It's just not. Okay. Going back to this, but I know I'm going back and forth. I'm going back to this book. Du Bois, I refer to what Du Bois had to say concerning the Sphinx. This is on page, Into Egypt Again with Ships, is on page 16. It says in his book, The Negro, that was in 1915, W.E.B. Du Bois, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, was born in 1868, died in 1963 in Ghana. But nevertheless, writes that the Great Sphinx embodies black features with its high cheekbones, a large nose, and thick hair texture. Okay, so that's what he was saying. Okay, and he sketched it. He sketched it prior to whatever happened. Some say it was Napoleon. Shot off the nose. You know, I've never totally been able to verify that, even though that's said quite often. I just don't know about that. Going back to some of the pharaohs. This is Pharaoh Huni, approximately 2650 BC. Okay. Doja, approximately 2670 BC. Okay, you see the nose damage. The nose gives it away. Why? Because if you're dealing, and it's just phenotype, if you're dealing in hot or warm air, you tend to have a broad nose. Of course, your pigment or the melanin in your skin is what you need to deal in that. Your hair like this, it recoils, it repels heat. Okay, And if you're dealing in cold hair, you know, it's better to have a slender nose, okay? You don't need the dark pigmentation of the skin, etc. Okay? This is Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid in Giza. This is an image of him. Okay. Then this is Mentuhotep II, Pharaoh of the 11th dynasty. I don't know if you can see this. See, these are not these are not European looking people. Okay? These are not European looking people. This is Amenemhet III, 1843 BC. Looks like he has locks. This is not, these again, you see that? These are not Europeans. Queen Ty, 1398 BC. Okay. So this is what the Egyptians look like. The ancient Egyptians. Akhenaten. Okay. The Ka of Tutankhamun. These people are black. Then there's a mannequin of Tutankhamun. These are people of color, brothers and sisters. There's no question. We don't need, you know. I'm not saying Nick Cannon did anything wrong. I don't even know what he did. As far as I just heard, I haven't read or seen the clip of him saying anything. I heard he said that the true Hebrews were Israelites, and that's been said. I saw Carmelo say something, Carmelo Anthony, and I read that Deshaun Jackson quoted something that is sometimes attributed to Hitler, which I can't verify. Nevertheless, you know, the Bible and history tell us what time it is. This is a relief of Hatshepsut's expedition to the land of Punt, and she was like a female pharaoh, if you will, and she reigned in Egypt. And these are brothers and sisters. These are black people. This is not. You see things going on where you've seen forgeries and you see things being defaced and the color being tampered with. But these are black people. I'll show you some pictures of forgery in a second. This is Merrillville, the daughter of Akhenaten. Okay. Now that face, you know, the color has somewhat been removed. And here's some forgeries of Rahotep and his wife Nofret. This is a straight forgery. But you see, that's not how they looked. Or at least these two look. I mean, that's an example of a forgery. Let's go back to the scriptures, brothers and sisters. So we read about Joseph and how he was mistaken as an Egyptian. And we see clearly Roman and Greek accounts, ancient accounts, that they were black people. You saw more modern scholars, if you will, Maspero and others say that they were black. Dr. Sheikh Diab, he attests, or he agrees with, he said, hey, listen, well, he makes the argument that Herodotus knew how to at least to record somebody's color. It's not like, it's one thing, you can't look at something and not know what you're looking at as far as a cultural practice. But a 5-year-old, if the 5-year-old knows his or her colors, what color are those people? Oh, those people are brown. Or those people look black to me. Or those people look white. Or those people have a yellowish hue. They could say that. See, but so racism is that deep. Let's go to Exodus chapter 4, because Joseph was not the only one that was mistaken as an Egyptian. This is Exodus, the 4th chapter. And I would suggest, and this is a short synopsis, I would suggest that you go into some of the archives and see in ways in which we have dealt with this in depth. But Exodus, the 4th chapter, and this is after Moses or Moshe, he leaves Egypt. Okay, He was protected in the Pharaoh's house while the children, the male babies were being killed because the Israelites were reproducing to such a degree. Okay, Exodus, and that's another thing. Even in Egypt, they definitely didn't look like these white Europeanized depictions. You don't look like that dwelling in Egypt. It's just not. That's just not. You don't look like that. Exodus, the 4th chapter, and verse. And this is not about me hating anybody. I don't. I don't hate people based on their color. That's stupid. This is just the reality. This is a truth. So when you say it, it goes against the common narrative. So people have an issue with it. But this is, we reading history in the Bible, and I understand that's a dangerous thing. But Exodus, the 4th chapter, let's pick it up at verse 4, because Moses leaves Egypt and he goes to the land of Midian, and let's see what happens when he goes there. And the Lord said unto Moses, put forth, oh, excuse me, actually, I don't want to read here. We'll read that a little later. Let's go to Exodus, the 2nd chapter. Okay. Actually got ahead of myself. Verse 15. Now when, Exodus 2 and 15. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Verse 17. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, listen to what they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. Now, why did they refer to him as the Egyptian? Again, he had come from the house of Pharaoh. Perhaps he had on Egyptian garb, but he had to look like an Egyptian in order to be mistaken as an Egyptian. Nobody would say I was Irish. Okay? Nobody would say I was Lithuanian. Nobody would say I was Croatian. Nobody would say I'm Serbian. Nobody would say I'm Romanian. Nobody would say I'm Italian. Nobody would say I'm Portuguese. They wouldn't say that. Okay? Why? Well, because they look at my appearance. Okay? Now, let's go, hold our finger here and let's go to Acts of the Apostles. Because, again, you have 3 people mistaken as Egyptians. This is Acts of the Apostles. And we want to pick it up in Acts of the Apostles. And I believe it's chapter 17. And no, hold on, it might be 21. Give me a second. Acts of the Apostles. Give me 1 second. Yeah, Acts 21, verse 37. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, again, Acts 21, verse 37. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek? Art not thou that Egyptian, which before these days made us an uproar and led us out into the wilderness, 4,000 men that were murderers? He thought he was an Egyptian. But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. Now understand specifically, he was, just so you know the history, Judah geographically, or like, let me say this, they were commonly referred to as Judeans, Yehudi, or Jews, okay? As we say today. But this is after the split, after the siege and disbursement of the 10 tribes, and Judah consisted of the Benjamin, Levi scattered within them, and Judah. And so after the Nebuchadnezzar season of Babylonians and the disbursement and enslavement of them, and them going back during the Medo-Persian era and the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, you have still Benjamin and Judah, but it's mainly referred to as Jews because, or when we say it's today, or people say it's Jews, because Paul was of the tribe of Benjamin. But here you have three, okay, mistaken as Egyptians. You have Joseph, who was a patriarch, right? And his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We're gonna go back to them in a second. And so you had Joseph, he's mistaken as an Egyptian by his own brethren. Then you had Moses mistaken as an Egyptian by Reuel, or like his Jethro, his daughters. And then you have he's a Levite. So you got Joseph the patriarch, you got one from Levi, and you got Paul, who's specifically a Benjamite. He is mistaken as an Egyptian. 3 different tribes. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to Genesis. Back to Genesis. And let's pick it up at Genesis, the 41st chapter. Genesis 41 and we'll pick it up at verse 45. I appreciate you, Brother William. Peace again, everybody that's listening. Brother Joseph, it's good to see you there. It's born again. Brother Dumont, peace to everybody that's listening. It says, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah. Okay, so now he's being exalted to this position, and he's going to actually receive a bride. And listen to where his bride came from. He gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Okay, so wait a minute. So where did Joseph's wife come from? Joseph's wife came from an Egyptian. So what did he look like? What did she look like? What did the kids? The black people. Okay, Moses had a wife that was what? Ethiopian. Okay, one of his wives was Ethiopian. But Genesis, the 49th chapter, you had to ask yourself, where is Israelites getting their wives from? But nevertheless, Genesis, the 49th chapter, and verse, because he had 2 sons. 51. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said, he had made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So you have an Egyptian wife. You have one that looks like an Egyptian. You got some black peoples. We saw the artifacts. We saw the account with the historians and the scholars had to say. We see more importantly, we see what the book says. Let's go to Exodus. Now let's go to Exodus, the 4th chapter, and deal with Moses and see. So we understand he's mistaken as an Egyptian, but let's see this event, or let's read the account of what happens to him when the Lord appears unto him. This is Exodus 4, and I'm gonna pick it up at verse. I'm gonna just get right into it, verse 6. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand into thy bosom, because he told him he made the rod into a serpent, and he fled before, because he, to show them, okay, because he feared, he didn't believe that they would believe him. Just to read verse 1, it says, and Moses answered and said, but behold, they would not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. Okay, so he said, what's that in thy hand? A rod. He threw it down and became a serpent. He took it by his tail and went right back to being a rod. Then he gave him another sign for them. Verse 6, and the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. Wait a minute. So it turned white. That's not much of a miracle if you're one who is white, and then you put it, which they not, when you think about people, like, you think about color, like people say, you black, this, my shirt is black. But I'm just saying these are terms that we use. So it wouldn't be much of a miracle if somebody who was of a lighter hue, much lighter, that would be considered what today in modern terms would consider white, and then they were leprous like this. That's not a big thing. But if I had to, put my hand into my bosom and bring it out and it's white, and then I put it back in, it comes out to this color, that's a sign. So he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. Okay. And let's read a couple other accounts here. This is from this book, Into Egypt Again with Ships. Again, let's read something out of here real quick. Because they were also described as, Israelites were also described as black people. Let's pick it up at just want to read one. This is in page 21 under articulated descriptions of the appearance of Israel. In the writings of the prophet Jeremiah, the true depiction of Israel's color is articulated. In the book of Lamentations, it is written, her Nazarites were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk. They were more ruddy in body than rubies. Their polishing was a sapphire. In this verse, the words pure than snow and whiter than milk refers to the righteousness, not the color of Israel's Nazarites before iniquity became rampant. Their complexion was healthy or ruddy, but because of sin, God began to bring hardships such as famines upon his people, which caused their complexion to change. Verse 8 reads, their visage is blacker than a coal. They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaved to their bones. It is withered. It has become like a stick. In the next chapter, the cause of the Israelites' darkened skin is explained. Lamentations 5 reads, our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. Blackening of skin is what transpires in times of famine among the darker races. But in order for blackness to occur in the skin, an individual has to be of a darker complexion. Jeremiah's sorrowful account of Israel's suffering in Lamentations is not only the scriptural evidence that supports the premise of Israel being black in color. This is on page 22, under hair like wool and feet like fine brass. Probably the most telling indication of the color of Israel is in John the Revelator's description of Jesus' hair, texture, and color. John writes, his head and his hairs were white like wool. This is quite different from many of the inaccurate portrayals of European images of Jesus, which depicted the Messiah as having flowing, long, straight blonde or light brown hair. When describing Jesus' skin color, John indicates that Jesus was in his dark skin, feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. It is true that the Israelites are black people, but to profess that all people who are black in color are the same would only add to the inaccuracies that this work was created to dispel. And I go on to talk about, because just to show you, because not all blacks are the same, is one particular black people. Maybe we'll deal with that at another time. But now I just want to show you some depictions. I showed you one already of, let's show you that again, and I'll show you some archaeology of Israel. So again, this is in the catacomb in Italy, 4th century. Now let's look at some other depictions. And this isn't okay. Hold on one second, because even the black or the white Europeanized images that you have are relatively new. But let's go back. I want to go back just a tad bit. I want to go back to some of these reliefs. This is a relief that may depict ancient Israelites being taken into captivity. If you can see that, these people have cornrow. These are people of color. Okay, let me show you another one. You might not be able to see that one. Let me show you this one. This is, again, considering what the people look like. These are Israelites. You see that? I don't know if you can see that. Let me get a little closer. Can you see they have locks? Okay. Hopefully you can see that. All right. This is the healing of the paralytic circa, or about 235 AD. This is also in Italy, and it is a depiction of a black Messiah. Okay, you can't tell maybe from here, but if you research this picture, and again, this other one, this is probably the 4th century. Okay, you also have, and I'm not saying you should be making these images. This is another picture. Jesus and his disciple, supposedly Jesus and his disciple, all black. Okay, then they have hundreds of these black Madonnas throughout Italy and Europe. Excuse me, Europe in general. And I'm not saying that these should be venerated. I'm not saying that, but it does show their color. For example, this is in France. You see that? I'm just showing you like the color. So when they had later, much later, even the pictures of Israelites, you can go on in these catacombs throughout Rome, and they depict them as black. This is supposed to be Abraham at the sacrifice of Isaac. This is Noah. They depict them as black people. Okay, Samson, again, black. I don't know how well you can see that. So that's just something to consider as far as color. And with that, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you that we're at the Household of Faith. We meet every Sabbath at 5925 West 25th Avenue in Gary, Indiana at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We live stream right here on the Israel Teach YouTube channel, as well as at www.israelteach.org. We have Bible study, which if you have questions, you can ask them at Bible study. We have it on Zoom every night. Actually, not every night, excuse me, every Friday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the personal meeting ID number for that is 602-961-1318. Again, 602-961-1318. If you want to email a question, you can do so at our email, the Household of Faith 12. Okay, the Household of Faith 12 at yahoo.com. If you've been edified through the ministry and would like to leave a donation, you can do so on our website, www.israelteach.org. And what else? Also, these books are available that I've written on Amazon and other places where books are sold. Into Egypt Begin with Ships, Hell Like War, Feel Like Burn Brass, The Color of Jesus and Burning Truths Concerning the Messiah, Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays, Killing Black Innocence, really this depressing book at this moment in time. The program to control African American reproduction from slavery into the present day self-inflicted genocide. For then shall be great tribulation, also present right now, and in defense of biblical polygyny, which is simply an argument that that from the Old Testament to the New, that nowhere is polygyny condemned. Not promoting the practice per se, but I'm just saying in that book I make a biblical argument because there's so much misinformation, particularly now I'm seeing a lot of it about marriage and what it was in the Bible. People all of their feelings except for into what the word is actually saying. So with that, brothers and sisters, again, I want to say peace to everybody. And so it's my prayer that you will edify.